Welcome to Depraved Society, where together we will explore our depraved society. Before we get started, please consider liking and subscribing to this channel. It's free and it helps my channel grow. In today's video, we're going to discuss serial killers that you've probably never heard of before. Last episode, serial killer Luis Garavito Cubillos killed over 300 boys in Colombia. Today's killer, Pedro Alonso Lopez, killed over 300 young girls in Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. He was known as the Monster of the Andes. Pedro Alonso Lopez was born on October 8, 1948 in Santa Isabel, Colombia. He was the seventh child of 13 children. His father, Medaldo Reyes, was a member of Colombia's right-wing party and was killed during La Violencia, Colombia's civil war. He was killed on April 9, 1948. His mother, Benilda Lopez de Castaneda, was 3 months pregnant with him at the time. They were poor and lived in a small home. To make money, Pedro's mother was a prostitute. In the small home, they all shared one room. Pedro's mother would also use this room to take her clients. Pedro and his siblings were subjected to hearing his mother commit these acts time after time, with only a sheet dividing the room. This affected Pedro a lot because he was a young boy when this was happening. She was also very strict and would abuse her children. In 1957, when he was 9 years old, his mother caught him attempting to abuse his younger sister sexually. His mother beat him severely and kicked him out of the house. Having no other choice, Pedro would become a beggar on the streets of Colombia. He would travel to dangerous neighborhoods and eat what he could find in the trash. After days of wandering the streets, he met an older man who'd offered him a place to stay and food. When Pedro went to the man's home, it turned out to be an abandoned building. The man struck him and abused of him for several days until finally letting him go. This made Pedro angry and resentful. However, this wouldn't be the first or last time he would be abused. He became more scared of his environment and he decided to travel to Bogotá, Colombia. He thought a change of atmosphere would help him mentally. Luckily, an American couple, after seeing him wander the streets, adopted him at the age of 12 years old. He now had a family, a place to stay, food, and an education. Sadly, his happiness would be short-lived. One day, one of his professors sexually abused him. This traumatized Pedro, and he ran away from his home. He was back on the streets again and looking for ways to make money. He tried to get a job, but was denied for lacking experience. He started stealing cars for parts. Each time, he would be arrested, but was always let go because he was a minor. He would continue stealing cars and was becoming an expert in stealing them. So much so that he was recruited by people who control the business of stealing automobiles for parts. At the age of 21, he was detained by police. He wasn't a minor anymore, so his luck ran out. He was sentenced to 7 years in jail. Only a couple of days in, he was brutally gang raped. Pedro decided enough was enough and decided to fight back. He made a knife out of materials he found in the prison, and 2 weeks later, he sought out his attackers and killed each of the men who attacked him. He took great pleasure in committing these murders. To pass the time, he would look at adult magazines in jail, and that only made him think of his mother and how evil she was while he was growing up. This was the start of his hate towards women. He was released from jail in 1978. Instead of rehabilitating him, his years in jail converted him into a sick criminal. After years of not being intimate with a woman, he sought out vulnerable young girls to take advantage of. After scouring Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, he realized that the most vulnerable women were actually girls between the ages of 8 and 12 years old that would travel alone. He would prey on indigenous girls of low socioeconomic backgrounds in Peru. He would promise his victims work and money and lead them away from their homes. The Peruvian indigenous girls were disappearing rapidly. The tribe was becoming scared and dubbed the killer the monster of the Andes. One day, Pedro was captured trying to take advantage of a 9-year-old girl. The elders of the Peruvian tribe captured him and tortured Pedro for several days. They buried him up to his neck and covered him in honey so the ants could eat him alive. A young missionary woman, who was a friend of the tribe, convinced the tribesmen to let him go. She told them what they were doing was inhumane and to let the police take care of him. They complied and turned him over to Peruvian authorities. The Peruvian authorities refused to open an investigation, citing a waste of time and money, so they deported him to Ecuador. Once in Ecuador, he started back up his depraved, sick acts. He would seek young, poor girls. He would rape them and strangle them. Once they were dead, he continued to rape them until he cut them open and the blood would be gone from their bodies. He looked for girls with innocent-looking eyes because he enjoyed watching their eyes glisten as the life left their bodies. He always committed his acts during the day, as at night he was not able to look into their eyes. He would stalk his victims for days until it was the right time. He would disguise himself as a street vendor and promise the girls gifts. He would look for innocent girls due to the fact that his own innocence was lost at a young age. He wanted to seek revenge. He would travel between the borders of Colombia and Ecuador from 1978 to 1980. A large number of girls were going missing at an alarming rate, but the police did not suspect one person of committing these crimes. They attributed it to sex trafficking, until one day in 1980 in Ambato, Ecuador, a great flood would uncover Pedro's crimes. 4 bodies of young girls were uncovered and found. Days later, Pedro Alonso Lopez tried to abduct a young girl named Maria Poveda at a market. The murderer was discovered in the act by Maria's mother, Carvina. She alerted many women in the market, and they all swooped down on Pedro. They almost lynched him on the spot, but Pedro pleaded with them. He told them that he was a humble man that didn't mean any harm. The monster of the Andes was finally caught. The women turned him over to Ecuadorian authorities. While in custody, the policemen interrogated him. He confessed that he was not Ecuadorian but a Colombian drifter. They played the bad cop role while interrogating him and tried to beat a confession out of him. This made Pedro stop talking, and he became silent. They threatened to kill him, but he still remained silent. This approach did not work. They decided to try the good cop approach. It was at that point that Captain Cordova disguised himself as a priest. He tried to be the father that Pedro never had. He offered him food and cigarettes. He asked him about his life, his health, and his feelings. He gained Pedro's trust, and Pedro confided in him. Cordova asked him about the gangs of killers that preyed on young girls, and he said that he knew nothing about that, but he could lead them to a young girl that he had murdered. He later led the police to a burial site in Ambato, Ecuador, where police uncovered the remains of 57 young girls between the ages of 8 and 12. Police asked him how many girls he had killed, and he stated over 200 in Ecuador, some in Peru, and many more in Colombia. He took police to over 30 grave sites, but they didn't find anything. This was likely due to flood waters washing away the remains or animals dispersing the bodies throughout the forest. Only 57 bodies were recovered. However, it is estimated that he killed over 350 young girls. In 1981, Pedro Alonso Lopez was convicted of murder and sentenced to 16 years in prison. This was the maximum penalty for murder under Ecuadorian law. He was incarcerated at the Ambato prison. In later interviews, he claimed he did not commit these murders but was an accomplice. He said he only knew where the bodies were because he was told to jot down the locations for the men. He only served 14 years of his sentence and was released in 1994 due to good behavior. However, an hour later, he was arrested again because he was an illegal alien and deported to Colombia. Once there, he was arrested for the murder of 2 young girls in 1978, but the judge released him due to declaring him insane in 1995. He was committed to a mental hospital instead of being sent to prison. In 1998, he was declared sane and was released on $50 bail. He was supposed to continue receiving psychiatric treatment and report to the police every month, but he did not. When he was released, this caused an uproar in Ecuador, understandably. There were unconfirmed sightings of Pedro throughout Ecuador. Pedro was last confirmed to be at his mother Benilda's doorstep in El Espinal. Benilda thought that he was there to kill her for making his life miserable. However, he said he wanted her blessing and took from the poor woman her old bed that he sold for parts and some money. She never saw him again. In fact, no one has heard or seen Pedro Alonso Lopez again. In 2002, the Colombian police launched an Interpol order for the capture of Pedro Alonso Lopez after discovering a new murder that fit Pedro Alonso Lopez's modus operandi. He would be 73 years old as of 2021. His whereabouts are unknown. However, some rumors are that he was killed by the families of the young girls. He is also rumored to live in Tolima, Colombia. If you like this episode of serial killers you've probably never heard of before, please consider subscribing to this channel. Also, please remember to kiss your kids and family members and tell them that you love them. You never know when it will be the last time you see them. Thank you and take care.